Welcome back to OT Sports. Today we got our Week 5 college basketball Power 40 rankings. Very excited for this week. We had a lot of upsets last week, and we got a lot of good games coming up this week to talk about on this video. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do college basketball every Monday, college football every Tuesday, NFL every Wednesday, and NBA every Thursday. So if you want to see any of that content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to make sure that you don't miss any of those uploads. But yeah, I think that's all I gotta say. Let's just hop right into the rankings. So at number 40, I got the Auburn Tigers. They didn't have a great week. They beat Virginia Tech by a pretty good margin. So they did look good in that game. Virginia Tech has been a team who they got blown out by FAU, but they did keep it close with Iowa State. I think Iowa State's a pretty good team, so I'm not really sure how good Virginia Tech really is, but they also played a close game with Louisville, who's not good. So Auburn did blow them out, though, as they probably should. And then they did lose to App State, road game. App State's 6-2, though. They're not a horrible team by any means. App State beat UNC Wilmington by 30, a team who just went out and beat Kentucky, so there is that. But again, Auburn shouldn't be losing those games. It was, they got App State was hitting all their shots, and they won by 5 points. They did have the crowd going. It was a road game for Auburn. I did keep them in the top 40, though. They're gonna have a game against Indiana. So that will probably determine who's in the top 40 next week. Indiana is close, but I don't think they're quite there yet. Colorado had not a great week either. They fall down quite a bit. They're at 39 now. This was a team I was very high on to start the year, but they lose to Pepperdine, and they also lose to Colorado State. So there is that. Colorado State is a very good team, though. They lose by 5, so that was a close game. But Colorado did beat Pepperdine. I had to drop them a little, though, just because they lost. They did keep it pretty close, though. So I definitely do think Colorado can get higher in the rankings. USC loses 1 to Gonzaga, but they did beat Eastern Washington. The offense looks very good. Looking at the team, I'd like to see a little more from Isaiah Collier. I know he's a freshman. I'm assuming he'll get better as the year goes on. But yeah, man, USC, they got to start winning. They're now 5-3, and they're very close to being dropped out of these rankings. Memphis at 37. This was another team I was very high on to start the year. They lose to Ole Miss. But Ole Miss is undefeated. They are in the top 40 now. Was on the road, and they did only lose by 2. They're still 5-2. They got a pretty decent record. They got a game on the road against A&M coming up. We'll see how they fare in that matchup. A&M is a pretty good team. Villanova, I just can't figure this team out. They're now at 36. They've been kind of jumping all over these rankings. I mean, at one point they were 20, then they fell to 40. Last week they went up to, I think, 17, and then now they're back down to 36. They, after winning the battle for Atlantis and taking down UNC and Memphis, 2 teams in my top 40, they lose to St. Joseph's and Drexel in back-to-back games. Both of those games were at home, so I don't know what's going on with Villanova. Maybe St. Joseph's is actually not as bad as we once thought. They've almost beat Kentucky. They took them to overtime, and they did end up beating Villanova. So maybe they're 6-2. I don't know. It is St. Joseph, though. Villanova should be able to win that, but the Drexel loss is just really unexplanatory. Villanova's at home. Drexel is 5-3. They do play Princeton, who was a team I considered to put in the top 40 this week. So maybe that's kind of a sneaky good game. I don't know. I don't really think Drexel's all that good, though. Villanova needs to win that game, but they lose. So they, Not a strong performance this week from Villanova, losing 2 games that they very well should win. This week they got 2 pretty big games. Kansas State, a team right on the bubble of the top 40, and then UCLA is a team that is a little bit ahead of them. They have those 2 games to play this coming week. We'll see how they fare. But they got to get it together against the bad teams. You cannot be losing those games. Providence at 35, another Big East team. They're 7-1 though. Only loss coming to Kansas State in overtime. They do have a pretty good win. Well, what's looking like a pretty good win now over Wisconsin. And they got a date with Oklahoma tomorrow. That's going to be a very good game. I'm very interested to see how they play. Um, yeah, I mean, just going to be a really good showing for both these teams. Oklahoma is undefeated. They have a pretty good win over USC. And yeah, we'll see how good Oklahoma really is. We'll see how good Providence really is in that game. That's going to be a big one. UCLA at 34. They they only played 1 game, but it was a very ugly game. They beat UC Riverside by 1 point at home. Not a good showing. This week they have a game against Villanova on the road. That's their only game this week. That will be a good showing for them, good test. They looked pretty good in the Maui Invitational. I know they did lose 2 of the 3 games they played, but they lost to Marquette by 2, and they lost to Gonzaga by 4. So they did have a pretty big struggle win though recently. So I don't know how legit this USC team is. I mean, I still think they're a very good team. They did keep it close with some top dogs. Arkansas at 33, they are 5-3, but most of their losses are to very good teams. They lost to Memphis and UNC, but this week they did end up beating Duke in the ACC SEC Challenge. So that was a very good win for them. They really needed that one, and it was a pretty big resume booster, so that was a huge win. And then this week they got Furman, should be a win, and then they go on the road to Oklahoma. I believe that's this week on Saturday. Another really good test for Oklahoma. So we'll really see how good Oklahoma really is. And Arkansas, another resume booster opportunity. Hopefully they can end up winning that one. Ole Miss at 32, they are 7-0, and they just beat Memphis, who is a team that's in my top 40, as you can see. I think this Ole Miss team, under Chris Beard, the new head coach there, I think they have the potential to be a very good team. They really don't play anyone for a while, so I think they have a strong chance to go undefeated for quite a bit. I don't see a loss on the schedule. I mean, their toughest game is probably on the road against UCF. I mean, so that's that's not a very good team, UCF. So I think they should be able to win all these. Now this is college basketball; you can lose at any point. There's a lot of upsets in the sport, but I don't know, man. I think Ole Miss has a very strong chance to enter conference play undefeated. James Madison, another undefeated team. I moved them up quite a bit. I had them at 40 for a while just because they haven't really played anyone besides Michigan State, who they beat on the road. But, Michigan State played an awful game and still almost won. They shot 1 for 20 from 3 in that game. But besides that, James Madison's kind of been playing some close games against some lackluster teams. But they just beat it. They just put up 130 points on a team. I know it was against Keystone. They're not even a D1 team. But that was still very impressive. 130 points against anyone is pretty tough to do. TCU, another undefeated team. They're in the Big 12. They're 7-0. Yeah, they needed a last-second buzzer beater to beat Georgetown, so that was a little concerning, but they are still undefeated, so I had to give them some respect. I moved them all the way up to 30. I think that was like 3 spots up. They got a date with Clemson this Saturday. We'll see how they fare in that one. That should be a very good showing for both teams. Alabama at 29, they just lost to Clemson this week. It was at home. They didn't look all that great in that one. They lose by 8. They still look pretty decent though, so I didn't fault them too heavily. Clemson is a very good team, but this week they got Purdue coming up this week, so that's gonna be. I mean, they have a really tough stretch coming up. Well, they have Arkansas State today, but the 3 games after that, Purdue on the road against Creighton, and then Arizona. Those are all very, very elite teams. So Alabama's gonna have a chance to prove themselves. Um, if they can play all those close and win at least one, maybe two, they'll be in a really good spot because those are all elite teams. Michigan State at 4-3 played against Georgia Southern this week and dominated. So I mean it's Georgia Southern, but this week they got Wisconsin tomorrow, and they also have Nebraska, who is 7-1, only lost to Creighton. Nebraska's not a bad team at all, and Wisconsin is in the top 25. So I think those 2 games will be a very good test for them. If they can come out with wins in those, it's a very strong chance for them to be back in the top 25. I have Miami all the way down at 27. You might think this is a little low for them, but I was really unimpressed with how they looked against Kentucky. I mean, they kept it close for a half, but in the second half, they just got blown out. They lose by 22 points, and Kentucky did not have a strong week this week. The 8 people has Miami all the way up at 15. I think that's really not, I think that's really bad. But Miami will have a chance to show this week. They play Colorado on Sunday. So they can pick up a nice, decent win and potentially get back into that top 25. San Diego State at 26. I considered ranking them, but they did just play a very close game against UC San Diego. I mean, UC San Diego's in the area, so maybe that's like a rivalry game I'm not aware of or something. It was on the road too. I don't know. I'll give them a little bit of a pass. I didn't rank them in the top 25 though, like the AP poll, for that reason. Um, but yeah, that's this group of teams. Now moving on to the top 25. Northwestern, I have a 25. Obviously, they just took down Purdue. Very good win for them. They're now sitting at 6-1. Only loss to Mississippi State, who had a kind of a rough week. Mississippi State's still 6-2 though, but they did just lose to Southern and Georgia Tech this week. Georgia Tech actually, well, I mean they're 4-2, so they haven't really played much, but they took down Duke, they took down Mississippi State, and they have a loss to Cincinnati, who is undefeated. So maybe that's something for Georgia Tech. But yeah, again on Northwestern, they beat Purdue in overtime in a great game. Their only game this week is against Detroit Mercy, who's 0-8. They should be able to take care of business. Clemson, 24. They got a big win against Alabama, and they also got a kind of an underrated win on the road against Pitt. I think Pitt's not a bad team at all. They are 5-3, but I still think they're a pretty solid team. And Clemson will take on undefeated South Carolina on Wednesday, and then they will take on undefeated TCU on Saturday. So those are 2 very good tests for them, and more tests for Clemson, and I think Clemson has a very strong chance to beat both those teams. And they have a very strong chance to move up even more in these rankings. But right now I have them sitting at 24, but they could definitely get up to that top 15 range. I wouldn't even be shocked if they did. They are looking like a very good team. Texas A&M sitting at 6-2. They just lost to Virginia by 12. They didn't look very good, only putting up 47 points. The defense looked good in that game, but the offense was nowhere to be found. Now Virginia is known for having good defenses, so there is that. But yeah, Texas A&M 6-2, and I have Virginia right ahead of them. I mean, they literally just played, so I feel like you got to put Virginia ahead of them. And yeah, I did that. They beat A&M, and they also dominated Syracuse, and they put up 84 against Syracuse, and the defense looked very good against A&M, only allowing 42 points. That's pretty tough to do. So Virginia looking like a good team. Only losses coming to Wisconsin, who Wisconsin's looked very very solid. Um, Sorry, not Virginia's not 6-2. Virginia is 7-1. Only losses to Wisconsin, who is sitting at 20, as you can see. Duke at 21. This was a tough. I couldn't really figure out where to put Duke. They lose to Georgia Tech on the road by 4. They also lose to Arkansas. Arkansas is a solid team, so I'll give them that. But the Georgia Tech loss is a little questionable. They still have a pretty good win against Michigan State, and they did keep Arizona close, only losing by 5 points. And I'm very high on Arizona. You'll see it in a little bit. So, but yeah, I don't know. Georgia Tech could be a sneaky good team, I guess, but I don't know. I couldn't really figure out where to put Duke. I settled on 21 right here. Wisconsin at 20. They have been looking very good. They just took down Marquette 2 days ago. They beat them by 9. They looked really good in that game. I'm really liking Wisconsin. Their only losses are by 10 to Tennessee, who is another team I'm high on. We'll get to them in a little bit. And Providence, who is also in the top 40. So two, you know, two losses to teams in my top 40. So there's not really a bad loss on here. And they also beat Virginia by 24, who just took down Texas A&M. They also beat Marquette. So they're 2-2 against top 40 teams, in my opinion. But they do have a huge win against Marquette, and Tennessee and Providence too aren't horrible losses. I do really like this Wisconsin team. I think they should be able to continue winning for quite a bit. Ohio State is at 7-1. Now, you might say I have them a little high. I did have them at 23 or 24 last week. I don't remember, but they have a win against Alabama. Their only loss is to A&M, who they lost to by 7, and that was a very close game. So Ohio State. I'd like to see a little more from them. I mean, they do have a alright win against Santa Clara. Santa Clara was undefeated for a little. But I'd like to see a little bit more. They're not going to really get tested till next week when they play UCLA again. They do have a road game against Penn State, so a road conference game is always going to be tough. But, yeah, like I said, I don't think they're really... I think they should be able to enter the UCLA game on the road 9-1. Oklahoma at 18. I might have them a little too high, or might be something that you're thinking, but they're going to have a chance to prove themselves. I mean, they are undefeated, and this week they play against Providence and Arkansas. Two very good teams, two teams inside my top 40. They do have both at home, so that will help them, but they do have a pretty good win against USC. Illinois at 17. They are a team who, in the Big Ten, I think right now they're looking like the second best team in the Big Ten. And yeah, they're 6-1. Only lost to Marquette, in which they kept them very close. They got a game against FAU tomorrow. That's going to be a very fun game to watch. They also play Tennessee on the road on Saturday, so they're going to have two very tough games. Tennessee at 13 and FAU inside my top 10. So those are two huge games, huge showings for them. I would love to see how they play in those ones. I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on those. BYU at 16, they are undefeated. They have a nice win over San Diego State. They also just beat Fresno State by quite a bit. Fresno State's not a very good win, but They do play Utah on the road Saturday. Utah's a solid team. They were a team I considered putting in the top 40. They were a little bit short though, so that will be a decent test, I guess, for them. Kentucky at 15. You know, I don't know where to rank them. I mean, they lose to UNC Wilmington at home, but they did just blow out Miami. So I don't know. They're kind of a team similar to Villanova, where they just need to figure out a way to beat the teams they should beat. Now, not in the same case because Kentucky, they only have one bad loss, but they do have some close games against, St. Joseph's, a team who Villanova did lose to. So, and also they did just lose to UNC Wilmington, but I kept them inside the top 15. Texas at 14. I don't know what to think about Texas quite yet. I haven't watched too much of them, but they got a game on Wednesday on the road against Marquette. That will be a huge game for them. I'm really, interested to see how they play. Uh, yeah, I mean, like I said, that's going to be a huge test for them. Their only loss is to UConn by 10. They didn't look bad in that game. They did need a buzzer beater to beat Louisville, though, which does worry me a little bit. But, I don't know. Texas will have a chance to prove themselves to me in the Marquette game. Tennessee at 14. They are the highest three-loss team, and you might say it's crazy that I have them at 13 when they're a three-loss team, but they have a huge win against Wisconsin, who's inside the top 20 on the road, and their only losses are to three top 10 teams, all of which they have kept. They have lost. The most points they've lost to in those three games is by 9. They lose to Purdue by 4. They were right there the whole time. They lose to Kansas by 9. They were in that the whole time. And they lose to UNC recently by 8, in which UNC put up 100. Tennessee's defense didn't look great, so UNC, I'm mostly going to give props to UNC in that one. The offense looked really good. I'm not even going to fault Tennessee. I mean, the defense is usually good for them. I mean, they kept Purdue and Kansas both to score 71 and 69 respectively, but yeah, UNC was just not missing, and Tennessee really came back at the end. They had a pretty good second half. I mean, they put up 53 in the second half, but UNC put up 61 in the first half. They were up 22 at halftime, so Tennessee tried to come back, but I mean, UNC, man, they were very good from 3 in that game, 43%. And I mean, yeah, UNC just, the offense was clicking. I mean, everything was. Tennessee got it very close. They got it to within, um, they got it to within 6 with 2 minutes to go. They did come up a little short in their comeback, but yeah, I mean, it's 3 losses to 3 top 10 teams. I really would like to see them get a win though. They will have a chance against Illinois this Saturday. They are at home. I think they should win. But yeah, they did beat Wisconsin, so they're 1-3 against my Power 40 teams, but all of their losses are to top 10 teams, and they've all been close. Creighton at 12, they just took down an undefeated Nebraska, so very impressive. I do have to put Colorado State ahead of them though, because Colorado State did beat them, but Colorado State also just beat Colorado, who's a top 40 team, and they just beat Washington. That was a little closer than I would like to see. But yeah, Colorado State, man, they've been really good. I have them all the way up at 11. They have potential to get even higher. Moving into the top 10, UNC at 10. Like I said, they just beat Tennessee, a team who I'm very high on. And they have another huge game tomorrow against UConn. That is going to be a very tough game for UNC to win. UConn is in my top 5. But But yeah, UNC only loss is to Villanova in overtime, but they have wins over Arkansas, Tennessee. So their next three games are really tough. I mean, UConn, Kentucky, and Oklahoma, all teams in my top 20. One of them in my top five. So um, yeah, UNC is gonna have even more tests, and they've been very impressive. I really like how they've been playing. FAU at 9. Besides the early loss, they have been really lights out. I mean, they have dominated most teams they played. They did keep it close with Texas A&M, but they did just take down an undefeated Liberty and a Charleston team they just beat by 16. Charleston's usually a pretty good mid-major team, so that was a nice one for them. But they're gonna have a tough game tomorrow on the. Actually, it might be a neutral site, but they have a game against Illinois on the It might be on the road, it might be a neutral site, so that's gonna be a pretty big test for them. I do think they can win, but they also have a game against Arizona coming up in like 3 weeks. That will be very interesting. Gonzaga, I have at 8. They, I mean, it's Gonzaga. They're 6-1, only lost to Purdue, which was a very competitive game. They have a nice win over UCLA and USC. But yeah, I mean, they kind of similar to FAU. They have one kind of blemish. Theirs isn't as bad as FAU. That's why I kind of put Gonzaga ahead. Gonzaga also has better wins than FAU. But yeah, they've been looking really good in the games that they've won. Kind of similar with Baylor. They don't really have much, but they are 8-0. I mean, they have a good win against Auburn, I guess, but that's really it. I'm a little bit skeptical with Baylor. They beat Auburn by 6 and they beat Florida by 4. Those are really the only two teams. So I guess we really haven't seen them put up a dominant performance against a good team. But not this week, but next week they play Michigan State and Duke both on the road. So those will be very good tests for them. Marquette at 6. They are the highest two-loss team, and I think deservingly so. They lost on the road in a rivalry game against Wisconsin team who's in the top 20. They dominated Kansas. They beat UCLA. They have a win over Illinois. And they lose to Purdue by 3 in a heavily contested game throughout the whole thing. I mean, look at their wins. They have a win over Illinois team who's in my top 20, a win over UCLA who's in top 40. They have a win over Kansas who's in my top 2, and their losses are to a number 20 ranked Wisconsin on the road in a rivalry game, and a loss to the number 3 team by 3 points. So Marquette is a very good team, and they play another tough team in Texas. Luckily, after that, they won't really have a test until they play on the road against Providence, and then way later in the month they play Creighton. But yeah, Marquette is a very good team, and they have another chance to pick up an even better win against Texas. So Marquette is a very good team. UConn at 5. I honestly think if that was a neutral site against Kansas, or if it was in UConn, I think they would have won. They lose by 4 on the road to Kansas, but they looked very good in that game. UConn is a very good team. Houston is undefeated, but kind of similar to Baylor. I'm a little bit skeptical on Houston. I like their team a little more than Baylor, just because their efficiency ratings and all that kind of favor them over Baylor, so I have them a little bit higher. But they really haven't. I mean, they haven't played anyone. Their best win is probably Utah, in which they beat by 10. They also just beat Xavier by 6. They did beat Dayton, who's 6-2, by 14. But they really don't have a nice win on their resume, and they really won't until they get to conference play. And even then, they don't play a good team in conference play, at least, until, I mean, I don't know if you count Iowa State or TCU, so really BYU and Texas late in January. I don't know. They do play Texas A&M this month, so I did kind of skip over that one. But I don't know. I just I want to see them play against a good team. Purdue at 3, they lose on the road to Northwestern in overtime. Northwestern's a pretty good team. They got Iowa this week and also Alabama later. I do expect them to beat Alabama though. And then they play Arizona next week. That's going to be a great game. Kansas at number 2. They just took down UConn, who I am very high and I think is a very good team. They also have a win over Tennessee. Their only loss is to Marquette, in which they didn't look great in. Kansas is a little worrisome, but they do have some really good wins. I can't deny that. They beat UConn, Tennessee, and Kentucky, all teams inside the top 15. Um, UConn being inside the top 5. Um, but they didn't look very good in the Marquette game. Um, this week they play a 7-2 Missouri team. They do have it at home, though. I do expect them to win. Not really worried about that. Arizona is going to be the number 1 team. I mean, you look at everything. They have a great resume. They're undefeated. I think it's got to be Arizona. When you look at the other undefeated teams inside the top 10, it's Arizona, Houston, and Baylor. And Houston and Baylor do not have anywhere near of a resume Arizona does. Arizona has a win over Duke on the road and a win over Michigan State. That's got to mean something. They also play Wisconsin this week. That is a chance for another huge boost to their resume. And then next week they play Purdue on the road. That's going to be tough. Their next 4 games are Wisconsin, Purdue, Alabama, and FAU. Those are all teams inside the top 40. So they have a chance to continue to dominate. In Arizona, man, they got to be the number 1 team. If they're not, I mean, I don't know who else is. You can't really argue with it at this point. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for the Week 5 Power 40 rankings. If you enjoyed, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, turn on the notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on any of our videos. We do college basketball every Monday, college football every Tuesday, NFL every Wednesday, and NBA every Thursday. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, my my Discord and X are linked in the description. You can join that, you can follow that, whatever you like to do. And I don't really know exactly what I'm gonna do for college football tomorrow, but I am gonna do something. So I'll see you guys tomorrow with college football. Hope you guys enjoyed this video.